I'm just so delighted to be here with everyone tonight, and have this opportunity. And my intention is that this will be a storytelling kind of time, but with some principles about working with energy transition and climate justice from perspective of here in New Mexico in this area, but with ideas that you can take or translate into the work that you do wherever you are. So I'd like to begin with a blessing and acknowledgement of place. And this comes from some Tewa women that I work with a group called Communities for Clean Water. And so I just invite us to be in a place with our feet grounded and realizing the sacredness of the air that we breathe. And I will be using the word Tiwa peoples, but you, wherever you live, might use whatever place you are with the peoples there. Everyone here is walking, living, and breathing within these sacred lands of Tiwa peoples. Let us fully acknowledge where we are and give thanks for living mountains, valleys, and waters which sustain our lives and form Tiwa ancestral homeland and those of land-based peoples. Let us ground our activities in awareness of where we are, and may the mannerisms of the Pueblo peoples enter our lives and fill us with gratitude, love, care, and respect for all that is shared between us and all beings. Amen. Blessed be. So I have a lot to share. So I'm just going to jump right in, and I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to be sharing with you here tonight. I guess I'd like to start with this title, which is Laudato Si and Energy Transition Perspectives from Working with Frontline Communities in New Mexico. And it's kind of a play on words in some ways. When we talk about energy transition, usually we think about renewable energy moving out of the fossil fuel area, which is causing global climate change. But I'd like to say that this is also a transition with our spiritual energy and our worldviews and the other gifts and talents that we have that we need to transition as human beings as to how we do things and how we integrate our spiritual practices and our spiritual energy into this work that we're doing. And in my case, I'm going to be sharing quite a bit about Laudato Si and a little bit about Laudato Deum. And learnings from the earth here in our region, indigenous people, frontline communities in the Permian oil and gas area, those people who are Navajo, Laguna, Acoma, and those who've been affected by uranium mining legacies, and those who rest at the foot of Los Alamos National Labs and our downwinders as well, because all those elements really are related to energy and maybe legacy. So when we're looking at energy transition, there's a lot to cover. And actually, I could do a whole day on this, but I'm going to try to condense it and not overwhelm you at the same time. Okay. Oh, goodness, for some reason. Oh, there we go. Okay. Wasn't working there for a minute. So with this, I'd like to talk about 5 basic learnings that I've had and things that I'll explore with you using a lot of pictures and things from what we do. And those 5 basic learnings are that we need to incorporate are: we are one with all of creation. 2, we need to address our past sins, like the doctrine of discovery, if we are to heal and move into new lenses and into a true new energy transition where we can also incorporate, learn from indigenous wisdom to help us move into the future. 3, systemic and economic analysis. 4, solidarity with frontline communities. And 5, something that most people who work in the environment don't include, but which I feel is essential, and that's mysticism, wonder, and awe for the long haul of this difficult and challenging work that we're part of. So with the first one, we are one We're people who are one with all of creation and with everyone in the natural world and everything. And Laudato Si talks about this quite a bit, that we are a single family, and that there are no frontiers or barriers between us. And within this, there is still less room for globalization of indifference. So it means that our hearts really have to change, our spirits have to change. And the picture that you see here is some faith leaders who've gathered. And this is at our roundhouse at our legislature in New Mexico. And at one of the events that we had during a legislative session, and we had a prayer. We try to integrate spirituality whatever way into what we're doing, whether in policy advocacy, education. And so these are some of the folks that gathered for that. And so as we look at energy and energy transition, in different ways, developing countries where the most important reserves of the biosphere are found continue to fuel the development of richer countries at the cost of their own present and future. And I want to make a case that that's not just other countries, that is here in the United States as well. And we are in one of those states where that continues to be the case. And so this picture that you see here, we often say in our state that we are a sacrifice zone. And so this picture is of some of our folks down in Las Cruces at the BLM office, the Bureau of Land Management office, at a witness that we had saying to the Bureau of Land Management that we have to stop doing leases of oil and gas, that we're beyond that time. And so this sign says, end our sacrifice zones. And we want climate justice now. And so I was recently on a talk where there were, it was a group sponsored by some legislators, some senators at the federal level who have a faith perspective on some of these issues. And they wanted to hear about extractivism, et cetera, mining from faith leaders in different parts of the world. And I was invited to speak at that for New Mexico because of the work that we do here. And I was very heartened that they were very concerned about the ethical, moral perspective and this whole area of climate justice. So this is just to emphasize more kind of this, that we're all one and we can't create sacrifice zones. This is a map that we created a number of years ago that's called Sacred Land and Water Trust Map. And it shows in our state the consequences of oil and gas. You'll see these little oil derricks in the lower right corner and in the upper left corner. You'll see kind of in the middle, there's some kind of yellow circles with black. That's all uranium, nuclear. You'll see some plumes or clouds. Those are from fires, forest fires caused by climate change that were burning around Los Alamos National Labs. You'll see in the middle like some yellow, and that shows or tries to show the drift from the first nuclear bomb and the downwinders. Just as a way, we use this as an educational tool to help teach people. And it's been very productive. And we were trying to emphasize the threat to water. So you'll see waterways in red, and those are ones that have been contaminated. And with that, I might just note that just 2 days ago, the 16th, the National Conservation Organization that monitors rivers and names the 10 most endangered rivers each year, just named our entire state the most endangered rivers, period. And that's because of the Sackett case that we had. And so that 96% of our waterways are not protected at this point. So as part of this map, we also show the oil and gas areas, which again, you'll see in the lower right-hand corner and the upper left-hand corner. You'll see several things. You'll see some red, which kind of shows a little bit, both of these areas have been monitored by NASA and show huge methane plumes. Methane is a gas, there's toxins in it, but is 86% more potent in terms of greenhouse gases than other forms of CO2 emissions. So we've been working on methane rules in our state and with lots of people of faith here for a decade. And then the yellow places that you see, actually have another picture, but I don't have it here tonight, are all dots, and those show all of the oil and gas facilities in the entire state. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. So that first area is that we're all one. We cannot create sacrifice zones. We're all connected. The second point has to do with the doctrine of discovery. And we need to unearth, face some of our past sins for conversion and healing to happen so that we can actually hear some of the indigenous wisdom and the wisdom of the past and present. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks of this when he talks about Patriarch Bartholomew and says, has spoken in a particular of the need for each of us to repent of the ways we have harmed the planet. And that includes one another. And we have to really just shift our entire worldview if we're going to face this, if we're going to really transition into a new energy and a new way of being. So the picture that I have here shows you one of the trail, this would be the long walk. We do immersion retreat experiences here in our state with people of faith and others. And we integrate, again, prayer into that, education, and then public policy advocacy. And we did one in the fall that was very unique in that it included a lot of healing around a sacred earthen vessel that we carried with us and that different people have been holding for several years to place prayers into for a transformation, a true transition of our energy and the fossil fuel use in the Permian Basin. And so we saw this as an opportunity to address those energy issues, but also as an opportunity of healing this whole legacy of the doctrine of discovery, of the long walk, of the Navajo people from Fort Defiance clear to the southeast part of the state to Fort Sumner. And so, again, there are many things that we need to address as we move into the future. And we try to integrate those together. This particular picture shows a place in Fort Sumner, which is the place where Navajo people have pilgrimaged to Fort Sumner, where many died on the way and many died there. And they carry stones and place them on this pile of stones to remember their ancestors, those who have passed. And again, I could offer a whole class just on what happened on this amazing pilgrimage that we had that was filled with grace, many, many prayers with Indigenous people along the way who were very grateful that we were doing this. And I have to say, I felt very honored and very humbled because I felt that they felt that maybe we were finally beginning to understand as white people what healing needed to happen and how balance needs to take place on our planet. Another place that's related to this legacy of sacrifice zones is the Trinity site, which is the site of the first nuclear detonation of the first nuclear bomb. And that anniversary is every year in July of 16. There are still downwinders who have never gotten recompense nor recognition that they were exposed. This enters into the doctrine of discovery as well, because this detonation took place. They were never notified of this. They were all Hispanic families many from ancestry in Spain. But I think it's because nobody lived there. Nobody was there, which is kind of the nutshell premise of the doctrine of discovery. We can do whatever we want because nobody really is there. Interestingly enough, out in Navajo land at Church Rock area, July 16th in 1978, the same synchronistic date, there was the second largest nuclear spill from a uranium tailings pond. in this country and maybe in the world. I'm not quite sure of that. And so every year there's a commemoration that we take part of. We're involved with um, the Multicultural Alliance of Safe Environment people. These are a couple of the leaders. One is a medicine man who actually offered very deep prayers on the pilgrimage that we did in the fall as well. This land has never been cleaned up, and there still are signs that say it is radioactive, even though there are people living all around. So I just wanted to show you this sacred earthen vessel because they are planted around the entire world, and they create sort of a mandala of prayer, and it comes from a Buddhist tradition that was revived. And this was one of these vessels is what we carried with us on our immersion retreat experience in the fall. And here's a picture of one of our young organizers. We try to work and mentor and work with young adults as much as we can because they long for working with older folks who have some experience and wisdom, but they also want their wisdom and their energy to be respected. And so Kaylee is holding this sacred earthen vessel that she had for a year and on her altar and prayed with for transformation, for prayers, for healing in the Permian Basin, where she lives in Carlsbad, which is a very difficult place, a very difficult ministry that she does or work that she does, organizing down there, and does it beautifully. Just another example of how we as faith traditions are trying to address this area of the doctrine of discovery, healing, and it means that we have to extend ourselves and join with others and other situations that maybe we're not so comfortable with for this healing to happen and to address and stop some of the atrocities that might continue. So this is a group of faith leaders that I helped organize a few years ago, and this is Bears Ears. It's up near the Four Corners area, and it was an amazing experience. We did this, and in conjunction with some indigenous leaders, Bears Ears is protected. It's the first time that various nations of peoples who necessarily would not work together came together to protect a large area, including the sacred area of Bears Ears. During the Trump administration, they were wanting to decimate this and decrease it dramatically for more oil and gas drilling, for uranium drilling and other kind of mining and extractivism that would go into the more traditional energies. So we organized this, and then we did advocacy afterwards, and we're working on that. So just another, and we had prayers and rituals as well as our advocacy along the way. So along with this, another element that I wanted to bring up was systemic and economic analysis, and that of technology. And for this one, I wanted to just draw on a quote from Laudato Si. And the mesas that you see here really are of Los Alamos area. National labs, and it looks down to the valleys, and the land around that and all of this holy land is of San Ildefonso and Santa Clara pueblos. They again were not really asked that their sacred sites and land that they did not give real consent to that being taken for Los Alamos National Labs for the creation of the nuclear bomb. Again, another kind of issue of doctrine of discovery. This was out in the middle of, quote, nowhere. Nobody lives there. This will be a great place to have this secret weaponry based. And from that has come other elements of the nuclear that we continue to address here through energy, nuclear energy. And I'll get into that in a minute. So in this, I'm going to read this Laudato Si because for me, it's rather significant in that I was down in the Permian preparing a presentation for some Catholic youth, and I wanted to, bring up something from Laudato Dam because it addresses technology and economics and kind of where we're moving and how people need to have consent and all of that. And I felt that this was written just for me and just for us in New Mexico because we are fighting down in that same area a project called Holtec, which would bring all of the spent nuclear fuel rods from all of the nuclear power plants around the entire country to New Mexico, which has no nuclear power plant. And the reason nobody lives there, that would be a good place to put it. So in Laudato Deum, Pope Francis says, the ethical decadence of real power is disguised thanks to marketing and false information, useful tools in the hands of those with greater resources to employ them to shape public opinion. Yet in reality, there does not seem to be any true interest in the future of these people, since they are not clearly told that the project will result in the clearing of their lands, a decline in the quality of their lives, a desolate and less habitable landscape lacking in life, the joy of community, and hope for the future. In addition to the global damage that eventually compromises many other people as well. And then one need but think of the momentary excitement raised by the money received in exchange for the deposit of nuclear waste. So I was, although I had read Laudato Dam, I had not seen this, or it never registered. So I was just amazed by this quote. And speaking of people that are the ones who suffer and are continue to live with the result of these economic practices. This is at a hearing that we had because there's a chromium plume under San Ildefonso Pueblo from the decades of waste going into some of the 1,200 canyons around Los Alamos. And these are very brave, wonderful women that we work with from San Ildefonso, Santa Clara Pueblo at that hearing. And then this picture is related to that Holtec issue that I was just sharing. And this is down in southeast New Mexico when we were trying to stop this Holtec uranium, or not uranium, but nuclear issue waste from these spent nuclear fuel rods from nuclear power, which we, in our state, through our legislature, we fought for several years and we said no to this. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is continuing to try to pursue this with Holtec. It's interesting to note that the Navajo Nation really helped lead in this because after all of the uranium legacy, they have over 700, 900 uranium mines that have not been cleaned up and a lot of polluted water and lots of cancer and health problems. They said, we will never do any uranium again. We will not support nuclear. We will not even have the transportation of nuclear waste through our reservation, which it would do if this were the case with this. So that was the Holtec issue. So the other area is to stand in solidarity with frontline communities. And this can be very difficult and challenging. And it means, you know, I know New Mexico is the land of enchantment. Going to nuclear sites, waste sites, the oil and gas fields of the entire southeast portion of the state are not what people would consider the land of enchantment. But I have to, I sort of say to people, yes, I live in New Mexico and the most visited place I go is the Permian Basin and see something of what you're seeing here, plus more of that with flares and lots of oil and gas. But this is what it means to stand in solidarity, listen to frontline communities, to experience life with them, and to really allow to enter into one's body and heart and spirit and soul some of what these energy practices that we have mean, and then reflect, well, what does it take to move in a transition? And so Laudato Si, we have a comment that many people are familiar with, hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And I like to interpret poor instead of poor, those who suffer economic inequities. And that is what happens. So these are some folks down in the Permian, and this is one of our immersion retreat experiences there. You see the flare in the background and some storage tanks. And so we take people to visit with frontline communities, and some of these folks are that. In fact, there to the left, there's a gentleman, and behind him, his wife, that suffered a very serious produced water spill from on their land where they lived. They had to then consequently kill all of their animals. They had goats and chickens and things, and they were sprayed with the water, they themselves, their children, because they went out at night saying, "What is going on?" And then they finally, through a lawsuit, which was very, very rare, they were given a money that they couldn't talk about, and then they moved to a new area. So just to say that's what solidarity means. These are on the same immersion retreat experience. Um, we were having a prayer at this very sacred area that is very a water body of a lake that is quite beautiful and is very sacred to people that live in that region. But they are also very concerned about this because in the oil and gas industry, there's a lot of produced water. And in fact, for every barrel of oil, there are 42 gallons of produced water. Or it takes 42 gallons of water to create 1 barrel of oil, and of that, 4 to 7 barrels of produced water are generated. So there's tremendous amounts of this produced water that has to go somewhere, and sometimes the people in the oil and gas trucks will just dump it anywhere, or it's injected into the ground, and because of that, we're having more seismic activity. Just to note, in the Permian Basin, well, in New Mexico overall, we have since 1973, we have 113,600 oil and gas wells. And it's interesting to note that the Permian began with a group of Catholic sisters who put money down 100 years ago to explore oil and gas in that region. And it was common for Catholics and others to do so at the time. And they weren't getting any oil. So the sister said, "Here's a prayer to Saint Rita, the patron of impossible cases. Here are some rose petals. Put those, say this prayer, and you'll get oil." And that is exactly what happened. So a part of our pilgrimage with the sacred earthen vessel, and even the work that we do as people of faith, is to transition from that spirituality, which helps set in place, to a different spirituality and to a new energy source. But as we take care of the workers, try to. And so we've worked on the methane rules, which is one way of calling accountability to the industry. And if they have to be more and more accountable, they may decide that it's not profitable to do so much oil and gas industry as well. But it also helps protect communities. Just so to note, this is a rig that was being drilled. Rigs are not what produce the oil. That is sinking the equipment, the fracking for the oil. This is in Hobbs, New Mexico. And as you see a house there, all around you, you see houses. This is right in a neighborhood in Hobbs. So, just to note, currently in New Mexico, it's debatable how many are producing, but something close to 50,000 oil and gas wells. And we also have 1,700 abandoned wells, and of those, about 700 are orphaned, meaning there's no owner for them. So when you go into the areas, and some of this area is more desertified than it was in the past, because the water was used for agriculture in the past. and the vegetation was not disrupted, etc. So when these oil and gas companies leave, they have to clean up, but they're not bonded enough to do that cleanup. It was estimated last year that it would take, excuse me, that it would take 103 years for the state of New Mexico to have enough money and wherewithal to clean up the current abandoned and orphaned wells of 1700. That's at the cost of about 125,000 per well. Some can be more, can be up to $1 million depending upon the site. And then in this picture, you see a lot of pipelines and piping, and that's not included at this point in cleanup. So this is another immersion experience, just again, some of the frontline community members and some youth who went on this immersion experience because they're very concerned and want to be part of this work. So in looking at transition of energy from fossil fuel to renewable, or would be wind and solar, there has to be many, many things taken into consideration. And I was naming some of them just in the cleanup, the health implications for people who are frontline people. And then there's also the workers. So these communities bear the burden, undue burden, and in the West, we have a lot of communities that bear the burden of the oil and gas, of mining, and we don't want to repeat that. And again, that's why we need to shift our worldview and some of those views that came in process with the doctrine of discovery and some other misinterpretations of our sacred scriptures. So we need to look at how are we going to change this into a different story. And, at the same time, we're still trying to deal with the cleanup also and moving into the future. And I just put this here because it's kind of interesting. This was this last year in our legislative session, just a few months ago. And we were trying to get more money for the cleanup of those abandoned wells and the future, because we're concerned about those communities that are going to be even more burdened and toxified and left behind and be even a greater sacrifice zone. And that added to the nuclear waste, which is also in this region. And we could not get increased bonding because of companies' concerns. So, but just to say, this is Clara, who's also one of our leaders. She's assistant director of IPL now. And knowing that we never know when things might change as well. So we work on the advocacy, we work in the education, but we work with prayer and spiritual practice. And this globe she is holding is filled with prayers from people at an event for prayers for our earth. And so faith folks, we are, and we're very engaged in public policy advocacy. This is a picture of us with one of our legislators in Santa Fe after we passed several years ago the Energy Transition Act, which was closing the coal-fired power plants in the northwest part of our state. With that, we had a fund that is being utilized for the frontline communities for transition, for some education, for retraining of jobs, for looking at other economic viability for those areas. Just to say, it is not perfect, it is not easy, and this has to be continued to be worked on, even as we move towards like wind and solar. In places in the northwest part of the state where there was coal, some of it mined for the coal-fired power plants, Navajo Nation is now putting in some solar fields. And this was also part of that campaign for renewable energy and that transition that took several years to do. And we as people of faith gathered at the Roundhouse and we said, hope is on the horizon. And that's all of us and all of our work together. And then, of course, we have solar in our houses of worship and solar fields. And I love this from the Norbertine community. And they created a Pope Francis solar field, just one of the many solar installations that we have. And clean cars is another area. It is not perfect. This just shows some of our IPL folks visiting Ford, saying you need to be doing more EVs. But as we work on this, we are simultaneously trying to work on some of the mining issues around lithium and other precious metals, because we cannot continue to repeat the kind of worldview that we have that has caused harm to our communities and many others. So the next statement that I have is taken from Laudato Si, and it's talking about these different possibilities, economic possibilities. The picture you see here is of a Navajo woman, and this is a project called Gallup Solar. There are some 1,500 homes in Navajo land who have no electricity. And these homes spend maybe $150 to $450 a month just to power their homes, sometimes on gas generators. And this is not healthy in any means. So, but the thing is, what is appropriate, and who makes the decision about what is appropriate to change energy or to do these kinds of development? And that has to come from the ground, the frontline communities. And these are some of the questions that Laudato Si poses. Here's another picture where we're kind of taking that into account and living that out with tree planting. And we were invited to plant some fruit trees at a place called Feed the Hood, which is in a low-income international district here in Albuquerque. And all told, throughout our region, we planted 5,500 trees with the Sikh community and others in various places, a number of them food producing. And so all of this is a part of discernment. And in Laudato Si, there's some very strong statements about water and a scarce and indispensable resource, a fundamental right. So we need to take that into account with any of the new technologies for transition. I was just on a call today with our national IPL looking at hard rock geothermal, which is a new technology, but it uses quite a bit of water, and we're doing that in our state already. So I brought that question up for consideration. What about the water? So the last element I want to bring up that is needed as we're looking at this transition, energy transition, and working with our frontline communities, is that we need for the long haul to embrace our call as humans and to mysticism, wonder, and awe. And one of the prayer books I use each day is Teilhard de Chardin, A Book of Hours. And Teilhard says that love is the very physical energy, the very source of energy of the entire universe. And so in this particular prayer, he states, this unique privilege of the cosmic sense expressed in love is a bottomless ocean into which we can plunge indefinitely. And I just love this because it shows all this potentiality and what's possible. And we never know when things might change, but love. And are we really using the energies of love and transitioning our world using those energies? And I have this dragonfly here because when we were burying our sacred earthen vessel in the Permian Basin, a dragonfly came before we buried this and was with us for 10 minutes, blessing us and that burial. And the dragonfly speaks of transformation, transition to a new way. So another quote from, again, that Book of Hours. And the picture I have here is of some of our friends that we honored with a Seed Award that we do each year for their good work from the South Valley, which is a very difficult place, or can be, to live. This particular project works with young people that may be getting out of detention. And I put this here because this quote speaks, I think, of our time. The sum total of suffering poured out at each moment over the whole earth is like an immeasurable ocean. But is it blackness, emptiness, barren waters? No, it indeed is potential energy. And that's the transition that we're in as well. plumbing the depths of our spirituality, of our souls, of the world soul, for doing good for this. And then in Laudato Si, again, speaking of many things that have to shift, and I thought this picture was a great example of this, because this is a group of Navajo folks working with some of our sisters at a care facility home in Gallup. And they're doing some land restoration, composting, etc. And with this Navajo project called Covenant Pathways Ministry. And the person that's working with them from there and their little community of young people said, we never would have imagined this kind of a partnership, but it is amazing and they love it. And part of it, what they're working on now, and this is another picture of that too, doing compost, but working on water harvesting. And then the waters that they harvest from their buildings will be trucked to Navajo land to use for gardening. So living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue, and it is not optional or secondary. And so this quantum world that we're immersed in, and all of this that I believe Laudato Si speaks of as well, evokes the new mystic. And this is one of our ministers who's a beekeeper. And so the mystic is the one who dreams from a deeper center and loves from an unknown spring of life. And then finally, this last picture is of a stone heart that I found on retreat, or it found me. Actually, I was having kind of a hard time. And this was at Christ in the Desert. And there was this heart, which again speaks to that very essential, important reality that love is the physical structure of the very universe. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Often people ask me, well, what gives you hope? You're working with all these difficult things, challenges in a state that's usually first or second in poverty, lowest often in education, etc. And I say, I'm not sure hope is the right question. I think what is it that brings you joy? And I'd invite everyone on to maybe go back to that story about perfect joy of Francis of Assisi, because I think we need that story. We need this kind of perfect joy, the mystic eyes and the mystic heart in our time, in our days with the challenges we face, that we might remember who we are, coming in the heart of God, love and to serve. So I'd just like to thank you, and I'd like to open it up to questions now.